Hey everyone, and welcome back to Daily Tuition. In this video, we are going to learn how to create this beautiful Node image uploader project using Node, Express, and MongoDB. In this project, I'm going to upload images in the MongoDB database and display them one by one on the page. In this project, we're going to learn how to work with MVC pattern to create a large project. We're going to see how to follow the programming principles. Then we also understand how to work with Handlebars template engine. Then we understand how to store all the images in the MongoDB database, as well as we're going to store all the images in the upload folder of the server. You will also understand how to make the backend API for this project, and you will learn a lot more than this. I will explain each and every step to make you feel more comfortable. So let me show you a demo of this project. So in the project, I'm going to create this page where I'm going to have the title, the subtitle, the input type file text box, and the upload button. Using this input type file text box, I'm going to choose my images and upload them in the MongoDB server. So let me show you. If I click on this choose images, this will open a new window, and here I'm going to select my images. I'm going to select all these 4 images like this and click on this open button. We are going to learn how to upload multiple images at the same time. So I'm going to choose 4 images and click on this upload images button. When I click on this button, it will take few seconds to upload all your images in the MongoDB database and display them in this browser like this. So once the images is uploaded in the MongoDB database, you will get the response back and you will have all your images inside the Bootstrap card. This is the beginner friendly tutorial. So if you want to be a full stack developer, then this is the right tutorial for you. Follow me to take a step ahead to be a full stack developer. So before we're getting late, let's get started. Let's get started and see how to create this beautiful Node project using Express. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open the Visual Studio Code editor, and inside it, I'm going to open my empty folder. This is my tutorial empty folder, and inside it, I'm going to create a new folder. So I'm going to click on this new folder icon and specify name to this folder, image uploader. If you want, you can specify any name to this folder, that doesn't matter. This is just a project name. Just for that, I'm going to open my new terminal. So here I'm going to say terminal, new terminal. And using this terminal, I'm going to initialize this project as Node project. So I'm going to first enter into this image uploader folder. So here I'm going to say cd image uploader and press enter. Once I enter inside my image uploader folder, let me just clear the screen. And here I'm going to say npm init. This command will create package.json file and initialize this project as a Node package. I'm going to specify -y flag with this command to skip all the questions. When I press enter, this will create package.json file inside this folder, and this will initialize this project as Node package. Just for that, let me just clear the screen and open the package.json file. And here I have all the details of my project. Now let me just install some modules which we are going to use inside this project. So let me open the terminal, and here I'm going to say npm I for install, and then I'm going to specify modules. So here I'm going to say Express. I'm using Express to create HTTP server. Then I'm going to say NodeMon. NodeMon is a node module that allows you to restart the server whenever you make any changes inside your server file. Just out of that, I'm going to say Express Handlebars. Now this module allows us to create different views in Express application. Using this module, I'm going to create a view for this Express application. Just out of that, I'm going to install Multer Node Module. Multer is a Node.js middleware for handling multi-part form data, which is primarily used for uploading files. So I'm going to use these modules and press enter. When I press enter, I'm going to have all these modules inside my Node modules folder. So this will create a Node module folder, and inside it, I'm going to have all these modules. Just for that, let me just clear the screen, close this terminal, and then I'm going to create my server.js file. So inside this image uploader, I'm going to create a new file, server.js. If you want, you can specify any name to this file. And just out of that, I'm going to just back to the package.json and create a start command. So I'm going to specify here comma and specify start command. So here I'm going to say nodemon server.js. Nodemon allows us to restart the server whenever we make changes inside this server.js file. So I'm going to just save this file, close this package.json, and back to the server.js. And here I'm going to create my HTTP server. So let's take a look at how to create the HTTP server using Express. Now let's get started and see how to create the HTTP server. I'm going to use Express module to create HTTP server. So I'm going to open the server.js file, and here I'm going to say constant express is equal to and require the Express module. Then I'm going to say constant app is equal to and create an instance of Express application. Just for that, I'm going to say constant path is equal to and require the path module. Now, just for that, I'm going to say here app.use. I'm going to call use method of Express module. Use method allows us to call different middlewares in Express application. So here I'm going to call express.json. This statement allows us to post raw JSON data when we make a post request. Just for that, I'm going to just serve the static files. So here I'm going to create a comment and say serving static files. And just for that, here I'm going to say app.use. As I said earlier, I'm going to use use method to call different middlewares. Just for that, here I'm going to say express.static. I'm going to call a method of Express application, which is static. This method allows us to serve static files. As a first argument, I'm going to specify path. So here I'm going to say path.join. And as a first argument, I'm going to specify directory name. This variable refers to the project name. Just for that, specify here comma and specify second argument. And then I'm going to specify here my folder name, public. Right now, I don't have this folder inside my project directory. So let me just create this folder inside this image uploader. I'm going to create a new folder. So I'm going to click on this new folder icon. And here I'm going to say public. Inside this folder, I'm going to have the CSS file. So I'm going to save the changes. Let me just create my CSS file here. So inside this public, I'm going to create another folder, CSS. And inside the CSS, I'm going to create a new file called style.css. I'm going to add my project styling inside this style.css file. Just after that, down here, I'm going to create my routes. So here I'm going to create my first route. So here I'm going to say app.get. I'm going to make a get request on the root path. So I'm going to specify here /. Specify comma here, and then I'm going to pass here a callback function. So here I'm going to say request and response. I'm going to pass two parameters to this callback function. So when we make get request to this root route, I'm going to call this callback function. And inside it, I'm going to say response dot send. And I'm going to send here a data h3. And I'm going to just close this h3 heading tag. And here I'm going to say express server. Let me just save the changes. Just out that, down here, I'm going to just listen the server on port 3000. So here I'm going to say app.listen. And as a first argument, I'm going to specify the port name. I'm going to say here 3000. If you want, you can create a dedicated port name variable as well for this parameter. Just for that, I'm going to call here a callback function to display a message to the user. So here I'm going to say console.log, and in the backtick operator, I'm going to say server is started on HTTP localhost, and then I'm going to specify here 3000 like this. Don't forget to specify semicolon, save the changes, and open the terminal. And now I'm going to just execute this start command, this one, nodemon server.js. So to execute this start command, I'm going to say npm start. That's it. When I press enter, this will execute this nodemon server.js command. And here I'm going to have a message. Server is started on HTTP localhost 3000. Let me just open this link on my browser. So when I click on this link, I'm going to have the result something like this. So on localhost 3000, I'm going to have this message, Express server. Next, I'm going to show you how to initialize the handlebar view engine and send the HTML file as a response. Now, once the server is successfully started, let me just close this terminal and close this package.json file. Open the server.js, and here I'm going to require a module and say here constant HBS for handlebars, and then I'm going to just require a module called Express handlebar. This module allows us to create views in Express application. So just down here, I'm going to create a command, setup view engine. So I'm going to just specify the template engine for this Express application. So here I'm going to say app.set, and inside this set, I'm going to set the view engine, and the view engine is going to be HBS. So all the extension of my HTML file should be HBS. Just out of that, I'm going to say here app.engine, And then I'm going to specify single quote and say HBS, and then I'm going to just initialize this HBS. So as a second argument, I'm going to call this HBS module. And just out of that, in the parenthesis, in the object, I'm going to just call some arguments. So here I'm going to first specify extension. So here I'm going to say ext name means extension, and then I'm going to specify here extension. In the single quote, I'm going to say HBS. So this is the extension of my template files. Just after that, I'm going to specify the default view is going to be default. We'll take a look at what is the use of this default view after a few seconds. But just for now, I'm going to say here default view, then specify comma and say here layout directory. So here I'm going to specify double underscore directory name. This refers to my project directory, and then I'm going to concatenate my views folder. So in the single quote, specify / and then specify views folder here. Whenever you want to specify path, use path module. So instead of this statement, here I'm going to say path dot join, and inside this join, as a first argument, I'm going to specify my current project directory name using this directory name variable, specify comma, and in the single quote, I'm going to say views. Using join, you don't need to specify here / or anything like that. Just for that, here I'm going to specify comma and then specify partial directory. Inside the partial directory property, I'm going to specify the directory name where I'm going to have all my partial files. So here I'm going to say path.join and specify dir name as the first argument, and in the single quote, I'm going to say views / partials. So inside this views, I'm going to have a folder called partials, and inside it, I'm going to have the partial files of this view engine. Let me just save the changes and create this view and this partial folder. So inside this image uploader, I'm going to create a new folder. So I'm going to click on this new folder icon and say views, and inside this views, as you know, I have this partials. So I'm going to click on this views and create a new folder called partials. Now once we initialize this view engine successfully, let me just create my handlebar file. So inside this views, I'm going to create a new file. So I'm going to click on this new file icon and create a file main.hbs. As I said earlier, to create handlebar file, I'm going to specify extension HBS. Once I create this file, inside it I'm going to create my HTML5 snippet. So here I'm going to specify exclamation mark and press enter. This statement will create a simple HTML5 snippet inside this handlebar file. Now just for that, inside this title, here I'm going to say image uploader, and in the body I'm going to create h3 heading tag and specify title express view engine. Save the changes, and then I'm going to send this file instead of returning this simple h3 heading tag. So instead of this h3 heading tag, I'm going to return this handlebar file. So I'm going to just get rid of this statement right from here and get rid of this send method as well. And instead of send, I'm going to say response.render. I'm going to call a render method of response object. In the single quote, I'm going to say main. Now the time is to explain this property. Now this property is actually refers to the main.hbs file, this one. I just specify the default value to this property. It means it refers to the main.hbs file. For example, let's say you want to change this file name. You want to specify this file name to index.hbs. You can do that as well. When you change this file name index.hbs, you need to specify the index as a default value to this property. So when you execute your Express application, Handlebar will automatically locate the index file and return as a response. I'm going to leave everything as default, save this file, save this file as well, and back to the server.js. And as you can notice here, I just returned the main file. Now let me save the changes, back to my server, and let me reload the browser. When I reload the browser, as you can notice, I'm going to have here a message, Express View Engine. So this will just return the HTML file as a response. Now let me open my finished project and show you the design. And as you can notice, it looks amazing. I'm going to first specify the title, the subtitle, and here I'm going to add input type file text box, and using it, I'm going to choose my images. And then I have here upload images button. And using this button, I'm going to upload multiple images inside my MongoDB server. I'm using MongoDB Cloud Database to store all these images. As you can notice here, I have 4 images inside my MongoDB database. Once I upload all these images, I'm going to just display all that images one by one inside a grid system of Bootstrap. So let me first show you how you can design this beautiful page, and then we'll move to the server side. So to create this beautiful design, let me just back to my project and then back to the main.hbs. And using this file, I'm going to design this project. Now, instead of creating a complicated HTML structure inside this main file, I'm going to just divide this main file into 3 parts. So I'm going to create a partial files of this main file. I'm going to grab this header from this opening body. I'm going to grab it. So I'm going to cut this header from this main file and create a partial file inside this view. I'm going to create a partial file and name this file header.hbs. And inside this file, I'm going to put that header. Save the changes. Back to the main.hbs. Grab this footer. So I'm going to grab this closing body and HTML. Save this file and create a partial file inside this folder and name this file footer.hbs. Inside this file, I'm going to paste this closing body and closing HTML tag. Save these changes. Back to the main file. And instead of this h3 heading tag, I'm going to just put this heading tag inside the index file. So I'm going to get this h3 heading tag and create a new partial file inside this partial folder. And here I'm going to say index.hbs. And I'm going to put my h3 heading tag here like this. Back to the main file. And here I'm going to import all these 3 partial files. So here I'm going to simply create a command. So I'm going to press Ctrl /. This will add a command syntax. Just after that, here I'm going to say header partial file. And just out that, I'm going to call the handlebar syntax to call this partial header file. So here I'm going to call a double curly braces, and inside it, I'm going to call the angle bracket, and then here I'm going to say header. So this statement is going to call the header at this position. Just out of that, down here, I'm going to create a command and say here body partial file. Just down here, I'm going to call handlebar syntax for including partial files, and here I'm going to call the index file. Just after that, I'm going to create here a comment again, and here I'm going to say footer partial file, and I'm going to include the footer file as well using this handlebar syntax like this. Save this file. Oops, I think I misspelled the header spelling. Header. Back to your server, and when you reload the browser, you will get the same result. So as you can notice, the partial files are working fine. Let me just back to my project and open the header.hbs. And here, I'm going to first link the style.css and add the Bootstrap framework. So I'm going to open a new tab, and here I'm going to search for getbootstrap.com. I'm going to open the getbootstrap.com website, and from here I'm going to get the Bootstrap library. So I'm going to click on this get started and copy this link, this CSS link, and paste it in the header section of this website. So in the header file, I'm going to paste this Bootstrap link. Just after that, here I'm going to create a command and link my custom CSS file. So here I'm going to say link, and then in the href attribute, I'm going to say css /style.css. So I'm going to just specify this CSS folder and style.css file. I don't need to specify the absolute path of this CSS file, because as you can notice, this statement is going to serve the static files from the public folder. So I don't need to specify the public folder inside this path. Save this file as well. Now, to create this beautiful template, I'm going to open the index.hbs file, and inside it, I'm going to create this beautiful template. So I'm going to create here a command and say section. So I'm going to start a new section here, copy this command, paste it down here to indicate this is the closing section tag. And here I'm going to say section and specify a class to it, which is section. As well as I'm going to call the Bootstrap class, which is margin y4. So this will add top and bottom margin to this section tag. When I press tab, I'm going to have a section tag with a class section and margin y4. Just after that, here I'm going to create a container class. So here I'm going to say dot container, and inside this container, I'm going to create the title of this website. So here I'm going to create a class title, and inside this title, I'm going to create h1 heading tag and specify title node file uploader, or you can specify node image uploader. That doesn't matter. This is just a title. I'm going to save the changes, back to my project and reload it. I'm going to have the result something like this. Let me just zoom this out a little bit. And just after that, I'm going to specify here text center Bootstrap class to center this text. And just after that, I'm going to add some padding. So here I'm going to say padding y5. So this will add top and bottom padding to this division tag. And just after this h1 heading tag, here I'm going to create my paragraph. To this paragraph, I'm going to specify class subtitle, and inside this paragraph I'm going to say upload images to the server. So I'm going to just say here strong, and inside the strong tag I'm going to say here server. I'm going to save the changes, back to the project and reload it. I'm going to have the result something like this. Just after this division tag, just after this title, right down here, I'm going to create a row, and inside this row I'm going to create a column. So here I'm going to say column 4. So this will create a division tag with a column size 4. In Bootstrap we have 12 column grade system, and from the 12 column I'm going to specify 4 column space to this division tag. If you don't know about Bootstrap grade system, I already have a dedicated video on it. You can find that video from the description of this video. Just after that, inside this column I'm going to create a form. So I'm going to create here a form tag, and I'm going to just redirect this form to upload multiple route. And inside this form I'm going to add my input type file text box. But before I specify it, I need to specify here inscription type. So here I'm going to say inscription type multi-part form data. Now in HTML forms there are 3 methods of encoding. First is a URL encoded, second is a multi-part form data, and third is a plain encoding. Just after that, inside this form I'm going to create a new row, and inside this row I'm going to create a column, and then I'm going to specify space to this column, which is 8. So this div have 8 column space from the 12 columns of Bootstrap grade system. Inside this div I'm going to create input tag, and this is a type of file. Just after that I'm going to specify class to it, which is form control, which is a Bootstrap class, and then I'm going to specify name images, and then I'm going to specify ID, which is form file. Just after that I want to upload multiple images at the same time. So here I'm going to say multiple. If you don't want to upload multiple images, you can remove this attribute. Just after that, down here I'm going to create another column. So here I'm going to say call to, and inside it I'm going to say input type submit. I'm going to create here a submit button of the type submit, and just after that I'm going to specify class btn warning. I'm going to use the Bootstrap class btn warning and a btn. Just after that I'm going to specify value to it. So here I'm going to say upload images. Save this file, back to the project and reload it. When I reload the project, as you can notice, I'm going to have the result something like this. I want to center this input text box as well as this button. So I'm going to say here to this row I'm going to specify justify content center Bootstrap class. I'm going to specify this class, save the changes. Now when I reload the browser, I'm going to have this text at the center of the document. Now just after that, let me add the Bootstrap card right here like this. So I'm going to just back to the Bootstrap, and here I'm going to search for cards, copy this code. So just after that, inside this container right down here, I'm going to create here a comment and say here display images. To indicate this is the closing display images, I'm going to copy and paste this comment again and specify /. So this indicate this is the closing display images section. So inside this I'm going to create a new section and specify margin top 5. So this will add margin top to this section. Inside this section I'm going to create a new row, and inside this row I'm going to create a column 3. So I'm going to create here a division tag with a column 3 class, and here I'm going to paste my Bootstrap card like this. Don't forget to align this code properly, save the changes, back to the project and reload it. As you can notice, I'm going to have the result something like this. Now just for that, let me just make some changes inside this card. So what I'm going to do is, to this card I'm going to add some shadow. So I'm going to add here a Bootstrap class shadow. Just after that, to this image I'm going to specify class img fluid. This class will make this image responsive. Just after that, here I'm going to say font poppins. Now this is my custom font class. I'm going to create this class in the style.css after a few seconds. Just after that, here I'm going to specify title to this card, and here I'm going to specify title UI UX design. Just after that, I'm going to get rid of this card text and say here text secondary. This class will specify gray color to this text, and then I'm going to specify font size 09. This is my custom class which we are going to create inside this style.css. Just after that, I'm going to get rid of this btn primary, and instead of btn primary, I'm going to say here btn info, as well as I'm going to specify font size 09 and text light. And instead of this go somewhere, I'm going to say here read more. Save the changes, back to the project and reload it. So I'm going to have the result what I want. Now just after that, I want to add some custom styling to this HTML page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to back to this style.css, and using it, I'm going to add some custom styling to this HTML. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just change this font family. So I'm going to open a new tab, and here I'm going to search for Google font. And from this Google font website, I'm going to select my favorite fonts. So I'm going to select this Roboto font, and I'm going to select the regular style, and then I'm going to select Poppins font, and I'm going to select the regular style font, this one. And just after that, I'm going to choose the import statement, copy this import statement and paste it in my style.css at the top right here, like this. Just after that, here I'm going to specify body, and inside this body I'm going to say font family Roboto, and specify callback value, which is this one, sans serif. So I'm going to call this callback font. So if the Roboto is not available, I'm going to just display this fallback value. Just after that, here I'm going to create my custom class, which is font Poppins, and then I'm going to call here this font family, and instead of Roboto, here I'm going to say Poppins. Just after that, I'm going to create my custom class, which is font size 09, and here I'm going to specify font size to the text. So here I'm going to specify font size 09 em. Save the changes. I'm going to have the result something like this. And at the last, when I click on this input type file text box, as you can notice, I'm going to have this border to this file text box. When I focus on this input text box, I'm going to have this border. I want to remove it. And right here, I'm going to say input. And when I focus on the input text box, I want to just specify box shadow none, and make sure to specify import statement to override the default property, and outline is going to be none. And then I'm going to specify important keyword. Save the changes. You can notice I'm not going to have this border to this input text box. So now the styling of this project is completely ready. Let's move to the backend of this website and add different functionality to this project. Now, once we have our template, let's move to the backend of this website, where I'm going to create a beautiful API for this application. So I'm going to just minimize these views and this public. And inside this image uploader, I'm going to create a new folder. And I'm going to name this folder server. In this folder, I'm going to create the backend of this website. So what I'm going to do is, inside the server, I'm going to just first create a new folder and name that folder router. And inside this router, I'm going to create my router file. So here I'm going to create router.js. So what we are going to do is, instead of adding this router here, I'm going to follow the programming principle, which is separation of concern. So I'm going to just simply grab this code right from here. I'm going to grab this route and paste it inside this route.js file right here, like this. And just after that, as you know, we don't have this app variable here inside this route. So let me just create here an instance of route. So here I'm going to say constant route is equal to and require the express module. And I'm going to just call a method of express, which is router. So using this method, I'm going to just create different route in this route file. So I'm going to just specify this route right here. Instead of app, I'm going to say here route.get. Just for that, I'm going to leave everything as it is, but don't forget to export this route, because I'm going to use this route in my server.js file. So here I'm going to say module.exports routes, like this. Save this file, back to the server.js. I'm going to create here a command calling routes. And here I'm going to simply say app.use, and I'm going to just specify single quote / this refers to the root route, and then I'm going to specify require statement, and I'm going to require my router file. So here I'm going to say dot / server router.js, like this. So now I can use this get route in my server.js file. Now you can notice here the response of this route is only in one line. But what if your response is more than 50 or 100 lines? Then the code looks ugly and it's hard to maintain your application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow the MVC pattern of programming. So I'm going to just create a controller for this route. So instead of this callback function, I'm going to put this callback function in a controller. So I'm going to just create a new folder inside the server. So here I'm going to create a new folder and name that controller. And inside this controller, I'm going to create a controller file. So here I'm going to say controller.js. If you want, you can name this controller file anything. That doesn't matter. And inside this controller, I'm going to just call this callback function. So here I'm going to say exports dot home. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a home controller function and export that at the same time. So here I'm going to say exports.home is equal to, and then I'm going to call a function. So here I'm going to say request and response and return an arrow function. And inside this function, I'm going to put this code, response.render. So I'm going to cut this code right from here and specify that inside this controller file. And instead of this callback function, here I'm going to call my controller. So I'm going to just require my controller here. Constant controller is equal to require, and in the single quote, double dot forward slash to refer to the parent directory. Then I'm going to select controller, and then I'm going to select controller.js file like this. And as a second argument to this get request, I'm going to say controller.home. I'm going to just call this method. Save this file and save this file as well. That's it. Your controller is now completely ready. Next, I'm going to show you how you can upload different images inside your project using Multer Module. Now, once you understand how to create a route for your application and how to work with controller, let's take a look at how to work with a Multer node module. So inside this server, I'm going to create a new folder and name this folder middleware. And inside this middleware folder, I'm going to create a new file and name this file multer.js. So inside this multer.js file, I'm going to use Multer module and store all my images inside this node application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first say here constant multer is equal to and require the Multer module, this one. Just for that, down here, I'm going to just set the storage. So here I'm going to say set storage. So you need to first inform the Multer module where you want to store all your images. So here I'm going to say multer.disk storage. Using this method, I'm going to specify where I want to store all my images inside my disk. So inside this parenthesis, I'm going to pass object and specify some arguments. So the first property here I'm going to specify is destination. Using this property, I'm going to specify where I want to upload all my images. So here I'm going to specify value to this destination property, and this is a type of function. So here I'm going to say function, and this function takes three parameters: request, file, and CB, means callback. And inside this function, I'm going to say CB means callback. Then I'm going to specify first value, which is null, and second is the upload. Now here inside this upload folder, I want to store all my images. So I'm going to just create here a new folder inside my project directory and name that folder uploads. So all my images are stored inside this upload folder. So I'm going to specify that folder here as a second argument. But what about the first argument? Why this argument is null? Now suppose the user uploaded something wrong, then you can pass the error message using this argument. Right now, I'm not going to do anything with this argument, so I'm going to just specify here null. So I want to store all my images inside this upload folder, so I'm going to pass second argument uploads. Just for that, here I'm going to specify comma and add second property, which is file name. Using this property, I'm going to specify different file name to the uploaded image. So for example, if you upload an image 1.jpg, I'm going to just rename that image and specify different name to it. So using this property, I can specify unique name to all my images. This property is a type of function, so I'm going to specify here function, and this property also takes a request, file, and callback as a parameter. Just for that, here I'm going to specify name to my file. So I'm going to say here var ext I'm going to first get the extension of the file. So here I'm going to say var ext. So now I'm going to get the extension of the file. So I'm going to say here file. Using this file variable, I can access the uploaded file. So here I'm going to say file dot original name. This property is going to return the original name of the file. Then I'm going to say here dot substr. I'm going to call the substr method of JavaScript, and then I'm going to say file dot original name dot last index of, and in the parentheses in the single quote I'm going to say dot. So this statement will return the extension of the file. So for example, let's say if I have a file name image.jpg, then this statement will return this extension to this ext variable. That's it. Just for that, down here I'm going to say cb, the callback function, null as a first parameter. I'm not going to validate anything here, so I'm going to specify null, and as a second argument I'm going to specify the name of my file. So here I'm going to say file dot file name. Then I'm going to concatenate and add dash to that file name. Along with that, I'm going to concatenate the date as well. So here I'm going to say plus date dot now. So I'm going to just concatenate the current date, and then I'm going to concatenate the extension. So here I'm going to say ext. Now just for that, once you initialize your storage, you need to inform this Multer module to set this configuration. I'm going to just specify here store is equal to Multer and then call parentheses, and in the object I'm going to specify argument. So I'm going to say here storage and then specify this configuration. So here I'm going to create a variable var storage is equal to, and I'm going to pass this storage right here like this. If you want, you can change this variable name as well, that doesn't matter. And just for that, don't forget to export this store variable so you can use this function in other modules. So here I'm going to say module dot exports is equal to store like this. Let me just simplify this statement. Instead of this, I'm going to grab this statement and specify that here like this. Both statements are identical. Save this file, and now let's create a new route inside your router so we can access the user image and upload them inside this uploads folder. So let me show you how to do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just get image and then upload that image inside this upload folder. So here I'm going to create a new route for that. So here I'm going to say route dot post. I'm going to make a post request of HTTP server, and in the single quote I'm going to say / and here I'm going to pass my form action attribute. So let me just open the views, open the index.hbs, this one, and as you can notice here, to this form I just specify the action attribute which is upload multiple. I'm going to specify this path to my route, to this post route like this. So when I click on the submit button of this form, this will call this post route. Let me just close this index file. Just after that, as a second argument, I'm going to pass my middleware, this one, the Multer middleware. So here I'm going to just call this middleware. So I'm going to first require it. So here I'm going to say constant store is equal to, and require in the single quote, specify the parent directory, and then I'm going to call Multer file, multer.js. Just after that, as a second argument, here I'm going to say store dot array, and in this array I'm going to pass images. Now let me explain what is the meaning of these images. So I'm going to just first specify the storage and pass array to it, and in this array I'm going to just pass these images, because if you just take a look at this index.hbs right here, then you can notice here the name of this input type file is images. So I'm going to just get all the images uploaded using this input type file and pass that to this storage. So I can store all that images inside my upload folder. Because I'm uploading multiple images at the same time, I'm going to pass here array. If you want to upload a single image, you can pass here single. I'm uploading multiple images at the same time, so I'm going to specify here array. Now I want to set the max limit to the upload. So here, as a second argument, I'm going to specify 12. So using this statement, I'm going to limit the user, so user can only upload 12 images at once. Just like that, once I have my middleware, once I upload my image, inside this uploads folder, let me call here my controller. So here I'm going to specify comma and pass my third argument. So here I'm going to pass my controller. So inside the controller.js, I'm going to create a new function. So here I'm going to say exports dot uploads. And then I'm going to pass here a function with request, response, and next function. Just like that, I'm going to pass here an arrow, and then I'm going to call this controller inside my router right here. I'm going to say here controller dot uploads. So when I make a post request using my form, it will first store these images inside this upload and then execute this upload method. Save this file back to the control.js, and let me just print my images first. So here I'm going to say constant files is equal to, and using request dot files I can access all my images, because as you can notice here, I pass this middleware to this post method. This middleware is going to create a property called files, so I can access that files property using request object. So once I have my all files using this property, I'm going to store that inside this constant variable and print it. Before I print it, let me just solve the errors. So here I'm going to say if I don't have these files, I'm going to say here constant error is equal to, I'm going to create a new error object. I'm going to just initialize this constant variable as new error, and in the single quote I'm going to say please choose files. Just out of that, here I'm going to say error dot http status code and return the 400 http error code. Just out of that, I'm going to say here return next and return the error message with this next function. If there is any error inside this file, I'm going to just exit from this function. Just out of that, down here I'm going to say response dot JSON, and in the JSON I'm going to say files like this. Save the changes, save this file as well, save all your files, and now execute your program. So let me just choose my images. So I'm going to click on the choose files. So I'm going to just choose this first image and click on this open button. So now once I have my first image, let me click on this upload images. Oops, I think something is missing here. Upload multiple. Let me just open my index.hbs and let me check this code. Yeah, right here. I need to add a method attribute, which is a type of post. Save the changes, close this index file, reload it, and choose your image again. I'm going to choose this first image, click on this open button, and click on this upload images. As you can notice, when I click on it, here I have the result what I want. It's going to return the field name, the original name of the image, and all the information of the image. Now let me just zoom this up a little bit, and if you just closer look at this statement, then you can notice I'm going to get the response as an array format. I'm going to have array, and inside that array I have this object, and inside this object I have all the information of the image. Now at this time you can notice here to the file name I'm going to get undefined. The path is also undefined because I think I misspelled something. And open the multer.js file, and right here I just specify file name. I don't have this property to the file object. I want to access this field name instead of file name, because using this property I'm going to specify the name of the file, and instead of file name here I'm going to say field name like this. Save the changes and reload this browser. As you can notice, I'm going to have images inside this path, and the file name is also renamed. So now once I have my image, let me show you how I can upload multiple images. Let me just back to my project and open the uploads folder. Here you can notice I have two images inside these uploads. This is the first one, which is the undefined image, and the second one is the images. Let me upload multiple images inside these uploads. Let me show you how to do it. And let me just zoom this out a little bit, and let me just upload multiple images. I'm going to reload the browser and choose multiple images. So I'm going to choose this first, second, third, and this fourth image, and click on this open button. Once I choose all these 4 images, I'm going to click on this upload images. Let me just zoom this a little bit. So now you can notice here, I have all my 4 images as a response. So I can access all the information of this image using this array. And now if you back to your project, then you can notice here inside these uploads, you have your images. And each image is unique. I'm going to just use this date object to uniquely identify each image. Now once you understand how to upload all these images inside this upload folder, you can display all these images on the front end. I'm not going to do that because I'm going to show you how you can upload these images in the MongoDB Cloud database and display that MongoDB database images to the front end. Let me show you how to connect the MongoDB database to this project. So let me show you how to connect the MongoDB database to this project. So I'm going to just back to my browser and open a new tab, and here I'm going to say MongoDB. And I'm going to choose the mongodb.com website, and from here I'm going to click on this sign in button and sign in on this MongoDB Atlas. So I'm going to log in with my Google account. If you want, you can specify your email address and sign in with your email address as well. If you don't have MongoDB Atlas account, clicking on this sign up button, you can create it. Once I sign in, I'm going to have the result something like this. You will have your MongoDB projects. I already have a project inside this MongoDB, so I'm going to create a new one. So I'm going to click on this new project and specify the project name. I'm going to specify project name image uploader, and then I'm going to click on this next button. And just out of that, here I'm going to set the permission to this MongoDB database. I'm not going to do anything right here. I'm going to click on this create project. This will just take a few seconds to create a MongoDB project. Just out of that, you need to create a cluster inside this MongoDB Atlas. So I'm going to click on this build a cluster and create a free cluster. So I'm going to click on this create a cluster for free. Then I'm going to choose the cloud provider, which is AWS. Choose your nearest region. I'm going to choose my nearest region of the server, and then I'm going to just choose the cluster name, and I'm going to specify cluster name uploader. Click on this create cluster to create a cluster in the MongoDB database. MongoDB will take between 1 to 3 minutes to create a new cluster. So now once you have your cluster, I'm going to specify the database access using this database access security. I'm going to click on this database access, and here I'm going to add a new user so you can access this database. Click on this add new user, and inside this password I'm going to specify the username, which is admin, and password is going to be admin123. I'm going to click on this add user button to create a new user with this username and password. Now just out of that, once you have your database access username, let's set the network access. I'm going to click on this network access and add my IP address here. So I'm going to click on this add IP address. I can click on this add current IP address here, but I don't want to display my IP address. So I'm going to click on this allow access from anywhere like this and click on this confirm. Once the status is active, back to the cluster and click on this collections. Right now you can notice I don't have any data inside my collections. So I'm going to use my project to store all that images and store that inside the MongoDB collection. Let me just back to my cluster, and I'm going to just back to my project, and here I'm going to create a new folder with the name database. And inside this database folder, I'm going to create a new file database.js. And now I'm going to install the Mongoose module and connect the MongoDB database to this project. So I'm going to open my terminal, open a new terminal by clicking on this plus button like this, enter in your image uploader directory, and see here npm install mongoose. I'm going to install this Mongoose module inside my project. So once I have this module installed, let me just back to my first terminal, close this panel, and here I'm going to say constant mongoose is equal to and require the mongoose module, this one. Just out of that, Down here, I'm going to say constant and create a function connect. And to this connect, I'm going to pass asynchronous function. So here I'm going to say async, pass parentheses, and specify my arrow like this. And in the try and catch block, I'm going to add my code. In the catch, here I'm going to catch the error. So in the parentheses, I'm going to say err. I'm going to create an object of error, console.log, and I'm going to print this error. And then I'm going to say process.exit and return 1 here. And in the try block, I'm going to just set the connection of MongoDB. So here I'm going to create a command, MongoDB cloud connection. And down here, I'm going to say constant con is equal to and call await. And then here I'm going to say mongoose.connect. I'm going to call a method of Mongoose module which is connect. This method is going to take the MongoDB URI. So as a first argument, I'm going to pass the MongoDB URI. I'm going to create a separate file for that. Instead of creating .env file, I'm going to create a JavaScript file in the root directory of this project. So here inside this image uploader, I'm going to create a file config.js. And inside this file, I'm going to say constant config is equal to and pass object. And to this object, I'm going to specify property Mongo URI. And to this Mongo URI, I'm going to pass value. So in the double quote, I'm going to pass MongoDB URI. I'm going to just back to my cluster, and here using this connect button, I can get the MongoDB URI. I'm going to click on this connect and click on this connect your application. And here's the MongoDB URI. I'm going to copy it, close this model, back to the project, and inside this double quote, I'm going to paste that URI. And just after that, I'm going to change a few things here. As you know, I have the username admin, and the password is going to be admin123. Just after that, I need to specify the database name as well inside this URI. I'm going to say here uploader and save this file. Just after that, don't forget to export this config. So here I'm going to say module.exports is equal to config. Close this file, back to the database.js and require this config file here. I'm going to say here constant config is equal to and require this file inside this project. And just after that, I'm going to use this config to specify URI of MongoDB. So here I'm going to say config dot mongo URI. And then I'm going to pass the second argument. So here I'm going to specify an object to remove all the unwanted console message. So here I'm going to say use new URL parser, which is true. Then I'm going to say use unified topology, true. Then I'm going to specify use find and modify, which is false, and use create index is going to be true. Now you don't have to worry about these properties. This is just for avoiding unwanted warnings in the console message. And just down here, I'm going to say console.log, and in the backtick operator, I'm going to say MongoDB connected. And now I'm going to display the connection host. So here I'm going to say dollar in the curly braces. I'm going to say con dot connection dot host. Save this file, back to the server.js, and call this database file here. So just down here, I'm going to create a command and say connect MongoDB database. And here I'm going to say require, and inside it, I'm going to pass server. Then I'm going to pass the database folder, and then I'm going to pass my database file. And inside this file, as you know, I'm going to just return this connection function. So I'm going to just call this function like this. I'm going to just pass parentheses just out of this require. So this will execute this connection function automatically. And now before I save this file, let me open my terminal. Right now, I'm going to just get here server is started message. But when I save this file, you can notice, oops, require is not a function. Inside my database file, yeah, right here, down here, I'm going to say module dot exports is equal to connect. So I'm going to pass this function to this exports. Open the terminal and now save the changes. Now when I save the changes, you can notice I'm going to have a MongoDB connected console message as well whenever you start your server. So now your MongoDB database is successfully connected to your project. Next, I'm going to show you how you can create a beautiful scheme in MongoDB database and store all that images. Now, once you understand how to connect the MongoDB database to your project, let me show you how to create schema in MongoDB. When you create a MongoDB database, you need to specify the structure of your database. Or you can say, you need to specify the structure of your collection. For that, we use schema. So how can I do it? So to create a schema, I'm going to create a new folder inside my server folder right here. I'm going to create a new folder and name this folder model. And inside this model, I'm going to specify the structure of my database. So here inside this module, I'm going to create a new file and name this file schema.js. If you want to specify any name to this file, that doesn't matter. And just out of that, here I'm going to just require the Mongo's module. So I'm going to say constant Mongo's is equal to and require the Mongo's module. Just out of that, using this Mongo's module, I'm going to create a structure of my database, or you can say a schema of my database. So here I'm going to say constant and create a variable upload schema is equal to, and then I'm going to say new Mongo's dot schema. So I'm going to create a new instance of Mongo's schema object, and inside this parenthesis, I'm going to pass curly braces. And inside this curly braces, I'm going to specify the structure of this collection. So here I'm going to first specify my first field, which is file name. I'm going to store file name in the database. So I'm going to specify here file name. It is a type of string. So I'm going to say here type string, and then specify unique is going to be true. I want to uniquely identify every file. So I'm going to say here unique true. Then I'm going to say require true. Just for that, down here, I'm going to specify comma and create my second field. So I'm going to say here content type, and I'm going to specify here an object, and inside it, I'm going to specify type of content. So here I'm going to say type, and this is also a type of string. I'm going to store string values inside this content. So here I'm going to say string and say here required true. Just for that, specify comma here and specify my third field, which is image base 64. And then I'm going to specify the type of field. So in the curly braces, here I'm going to say type. It is a type of string. And then specify required true. That's it. And at the end down here, I'm going to say model dot exports is equal to create a variable upload model, and then just specify equal to sign and say Mongo's dot model. And just out of that, as a first argument, I'm going to specify name of my model, or you can say I'm going to specify name of my collection. Here I'm going to say in the single quote uploads. So MongoDB will create a collection called uploads inside my database, and I'm going to specify structure for this collection. So I'm going to pass this object as a second argument to this Mongo's model method like this, and then I'm going to store this model inside this variable and export it. That's it. Now just out of that, once we have the MongoDB schema, let's move to the controller, and here I'm going to just access that MongoDB schema and store all these images inside my MongoDB database. So up here, I'm going to just say constant and call the upload model using required statement like this. So here I'm going to say double dot / model, and then I'm going to pass my schema.js file. So once I have my model here, let me just store some data inside it. So just after this if statement down here, I'm going to use this model. So what I'm going to do is, here I'm going to first iterate over my images. As you know, this statement is going to return an array of images. So I'm going to first iterate over that images and convert that images into base 64 encoding. So here I'm going to create a command and say convert images into base 64 encoding. Base 64 encoding is a way to convert data into ASCII character set. The size of the base 64 encoded is the actual size of your original data. So I'm going to just converting all my images into base 64 encoding, and then I'm going to store that in my MongoDB database. Here I'm going to just say let img array. I'm going to iterate over my array of images. So I'm going to create here a variable img array and see here files dot map. I'm going to call a JavaScript method map to iterate over array, and then as a first argument I'm going to pass callback function with a parameter file. If you want, you can specify any name to this parameter. Just after that, inside this file, inside this callback function, I'm going to just create a variable let img is equal to, and inside this img variable I'm going to store my images as a buffer data, and then I'm going to convert that buffer data into base 64. So what I'm going to do is here I'm going to call the fs node module. So before I use it, I need to import that module. So here I'm going to say constant fs is equal to and say require fs. Fs is an inbuilt module in Node. You don't need to install this module manually. You just need to require that module to use it. So here I'm going to say fs dot read file sync. This method is going to buffer your image and store that in this img variable. If you print this variable, you will get the buffer data. So here in this read file sync, I'm going to pass my file path. So here I'm going to say file dot path. So I'm going to pass my file path inside this method. So this method is going to convert your image into buffer and store that in this variable. If you want, you can print this variable on the console to see how buffer looks like. Just start that down here. I'm going to say return, and I'm going to just return from this function, and here I'm going to say img dot toString, and I'm going to convert this img into base 64. So I'm going to just store this buffer into base 64 format and store that in a variable. So here I'm going to say encode image and store that in this variable and just return that variable using this return statement. And then I'm going to just store this encoded image inside this img array. So this variable is going to return an array of base 64 image. So now when you print this img array, you're going to get all your selected images as base 64 format. Let me show you the result first. So I'm going to just copy this img array and return that as a response. Save this file back to my project, and now let me reload it. Let me choose my image. So I'm going to choose 2 images this time and click on this open button. And when I click on this upload image, as you can notice, you will have the response something like this. This is the base 64 format of your image. I'm going to store this data inside my MongoDB database to access my image. This is just the encoding of your image. You don't have to care about this data. So let me just back to my project and write down here, I'm going to say img array dot map. So I'm going to just iterate over this img array because this statement is going to return as an array inside this variable. So inside this img array, I have multiple images. So I'm going to just iterate over that images using map method. So inside this map, I'm going to call callback function. So here I'm going to pass source and index. And now inside this map method, I'm going to create and store this data, this base 64 image in my database. So here I'm going to create an object for that. So let me first create here a command and say create object to store data in the collection, or you can say in the database. So here I'm going to say let final img is equal to and create an object here. And just out of that, I'm going to first specify the file name, because as you can see in the scheme, file name, the content type, and the image base 64. So I'm going to say here inside the controller, I'm going to first specify value to this file name, and this is the type of string. So I'm going to pass my file name here. So I'm going to simply say request dot files. As you know, I have all my files inside this variable. So instead of these files, I can just say files. So here I'm going to say files, and in the square bracket, I'm going to specify index. So using this map function, I'm going to iterate over each index and pass that index to these files. Just out of that, I'm going to just get the original name of the file. So here I'm going to say dot original name, and I'm going to just store that name inside my database. Just out of that, As you know, we have the content type. So here I'm going to say content type, and to this content type I'm going to say files, and in the square bracket I'm going to say index. I'm going to access all the files using index and say MIME types. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to access the property of files MIME type and store that in this content type field. Just after that, specify comma here, and as you know, we have the third field, which is image base 64. I'm going to store value inside it, and this is a type of string. So in the controller here I'm going to say image base 64, and as you know, I'm going to iterate over the images using this image array. So in the source attribute I have all the images base 64 format. So here I'm going to say src. That's it. So once I have my object ready, let me store this object in my MongoDB database. So down here I'm going to say let new upload, and then I'm going to create a new object of model. So here I'm going to say new upload model, and then I'm going to pass my final image object here, this one. I'm going to pass this object right here. So once I have my new object, my new model, let me just call this save method to save this data in my MongoDB database. So down here I'm going to say return new upload, and I'm going to just execute my chain methods. So here I'm going to say dot save. This method is going to save this data in the MongoDB database. Just after that I'm going to say here dot, then I'm going to call the promises then method, and as a response of this promise I'm going to return a message. So in the curly braces I'm going to say msg, and using this backtick operator here I'm going to say image uploaded successfully. So when the image is successfully uploaded, I'm going to have this message as a response. If you want, you can display the image as well instead of the static hard-coded image. So instead of this hard-coded image here, I'm going to call dollar curly braces, and here I'm going to say files. In the square bracket I'm going to say index. As you know, we are in this map method, so I can access this index. Just after that, just after this index I'm going to call original name. So now when you upload your image, you will get the image name with the successful message. And then if there is any error inside your database, I'm going to just catch that error using catch method. So I'm going to say here catch error and call a callback function here and say if you have error here, I want to catch two error at the same time. If we have a duplicate image uploaded on the server, I want to display a different message to the user, and if there is any other error, I want to display different message. So how can I do it? I'm going to do that using if statement. So here I'm going to say if we have error, let me just filter that error. So here I'm going to say if error dot name is equal to Mongo error, if the error is a type of Mongo error, and the error code is equal to 11000, then I'm going to execute this if statement. Now this code refers to the duplicate value in the MongoDB database. So if you try to upload a duplicate image in the MongoDB database, you will get this response. So here in this if statement, I'm going to just return a response. So here I'm going to say return promise dot reject, and then I'm going to just return error with a message. So I'm going to just use backtick operator and say duplicate, and then just call the file name. So I'm going to copy this variable, paste it here like this, and then I'm going to say dot file already exist. So if the file is already exist, I'm going to have this error message. Otherwise I'm going to just return a promise with reject, and in the object I'm going to say error dot message. So I'm going to display the error message, and if this value is not available, I'm going to pass the default value to this error message, which is cannot upload, and I'm going to pass this variable right here and say something missing. If the message is not available, I'm going to print this default value. Just out of that, as you can notice here, this map is going to now return a promise as a response in the array format. So we need to iterate over that array, and also we need to iterate over that promises as well to get the result. So as you can notice here, I'm going to start this map right from here and end that map right here. So let me just get that result in the variable. So I'm going to create here a variable, let result is equal to, and inside this result I have the array of the type promises. So if all promises resolve, I'm going to return the successful message, otherwise return reject message. So down here, instead of this response.json, right here I'm going to say promise.all, and in the parentheses I'm going to pass a result variable. So this will iterate over all my promises and get the response. So down here I'm going to say then, and if all the promises is resolved successfully, I'm going to say here msg and pass here a callback function and say response dot redirect, and I'm going to just redirect the user to the root route. If you want, you can print this msg message. This will print this image uploaded successfully message to the user, but it will redirect you to the new route. I don't want to do it. I want to just redirect the user on the same route. Let me show you. If I just get rid of this statement right from here, and if I say here response.json, then you can notice when I print this msg, I'm going to have this message. Let me show you. But before I upload my image to the database, let me just catch the error as well. Down here I'm going to say catch, say here error, call the callback function and say response.json, and here I'm going to say error. Save this file, back to the top and click on this collection. When you click on the collection, you don't have any data inside your collection. As you can notice here, you have uploader and this upload collection, but you don't have any data inside it. So let me store my images inside this uploads collection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just back to my project, reload it, and I'm going to choose files. So I'm going to click on this choose files and select all my 4 images and click on this open button. And when I click on this upload images, you can notice this will store all my images in my MongoDB database and return a response. You can notice here I'm going to have an array of message image 1 uploaded successfully, image 2 uploaded successfully, and I have all my successful messages as a response. So as you can notice, the images is now successfully uploaded in my MongoDB database. Let me show you. Let me open my collection and refresh it. When I refresh my MongoDB collection, inside my MongoDB collection, I have all my data. You can notice here the total document size is 4. The size of your collection is 4.23 MB because, as I said earlier, base64 store the actual data of your image. If you just click on this next, so this is your second record. When you click on this next, you will get your third and fourth record. Now once you understand how to upload the image in the MongoDB database, let me just back to my project, and instead of this response, I'm going to just redirect the user to the root route instead of this response. So I'm going to comment this, save this file, and now let me show you how to display all these images inside the Bootstrap card. Now once you understand how to upload all your images in the MongoDB database, let me show you how to display all that images inside this Bootstrap card. So let me just back to my project, and as you can notice here, I have a response and I render the main file as a response. I can pass a variable with this file. If I just specify a second argument to this method, if I say here comma and then specify in the object images, and if I pass here value all images, then I can access this variable inside my main file. Let me show you. Let me save the changes and back to the index file, index.hbs, and right here down here I'm going to just print my all images variable. Right up here I'm going to create h3 heading tag and then specify double curly braces like this, and inside these curly braces I'm going to just pass this variable name images like this. And now when I reload my browser, I'm going to have this value all images. So you can access your images values inside your template very easily with this second argument. Now instead of this hard-coded value, I'm going to get the data from my MongoDB database and pass that to this variable, so I can access all my images and display them one by one on my template. So I'm going to get rid of this all images, and up here I'm going to say constant all images is equal to, and here I'm going to call upload model, and then I'm going to call a method dot find. This method is going to return all the data of MongoDB database to this variable. I want to make this statement asynchronous, so I can pass here async and await function. So here I'm going to say async and await. So this statement is now asynchronous. So I'm going to just pass this all images to this variable so I can access it in my template. So I'm going to save the changes back to the index.hbs, and let me get rid of this h3 heading tag. And now I can access all my images. As you know, this find is going to return an array, and inside that array we have all the images in the object. So I'm going to just first iterate over array and iterate over that object. So inside this column I'm going to just call these images. So here I'm going to just call the each method of handlebar. So in the double curly braces I'm going to say hash each. To iterate over array I'm going to use each syntax of handlebar. Here I'm going to say each images. I'm going to access this variable inside this index file, so I'm going to just use each, and let me close this each. So down here I'm going to just call double curly braces / each. So this will just close this each statement, and inside this each statement I'm going to add another each statement, because as I said earlier, I have these images inside an array, and inside that array I have an object. Once I iterate over that array, let me iterate over the object. Here I'm going to say double curly braces hash each this. So I'm going to just iterate over the current object. Let me close this. So I'm going to copy this each, paste it right here, and here I'm going to call double curly braces and say if image base 64 is available, then I'm going to execute this if statement. So down here I'm going to say if, and then close this if statement like this. If in the object we have this property image base 64, if we have this property, let me just execute this if statement. So inside this if I'm going to call my bootstrap card. So let me just create here a command and say bootstrap cards. Close this command down here to indicate this is a closing bootstrap card. Now just for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this column and put that inside this if statement, because we have multiple images, and once we have multiple images I can create multiple columns with that images. So I'm going to just put this division tag inside this if statement. I'm going to just say dot col 3. So I'm going to create a division tag with column 3, grab this card right from here, cut this and paste it inside this column like this. Don't forget to align this code properly. Once we have this column inside this if statement, let me get rid of this column from here. Don't forget to get rid of this div, this closing div as well. And now instead of this hard-coded source value, I'm going to just pass my data. So instead of this hard-coded source value, and here I'm going to say single quote, and inside the single quote I'm going to say data colon, then I'm going to pass the handlebar syntax, which is double curly braces with double closing curly braces, and here I'm going to say content type. So inside this variable I have the content type of my image, and then I'm going to pass here colon, and here I'm going to say base 64 comma, then pass handlebar syntax like this, and here I'm going to pass this property image base 64. So I'm going to pass my data to this source attribute. So whenever you want to access your base 64 and display your image, you need to first pass the data of that base 64 and then pass the value of base 64. Let me just save the changes. If you want, you can store this data in the MongoDB database as well, but this application is only focused on uploading images in the MongoDB database. So I'm not going to change this text. I'm going to leave everything as it is, save the changes, back to my project and reload it. When I reload my project, you can notice here, this will print all my images inside bootstrap card. And now if you inspect this, you can notice you have the data image JPG and you have the base 64 format with the data. So this is how you can store all the images and display all your images in Node application. So I hope you understand how to work with MongoDB and store all your images inside the MongoDB database and display them one by one in your application. If you find anything useful, don't forget to click on the like button, share this video with your friends, subscribe for more latest programming videos. That is all for now. I will see you with a new video with a new topic.